Okay, what's going on, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fortnite Mythbusters. In today's episode, we have so many awesome myths that you guys suggested on the last episode, so just like always, if you do have a myth you would like me to test in the next or future episodes of the Fortnite Mythbusters, make sure to go down in the comments and drop a comment of a myth for a pretty good chance to be featured. As well, if you do enjoy today's video at any moment, feel free to leave a like. Let's see if we can smash 3,082 likes on today's episode. That would be insane. Shout out to Emad the Legend for being the first comment on my last video. If you do enjoy my content and you would like to see more, make sure to subscribe and turn on those post notifications to never miss another Fortnite Mythbusters episode. Without further ado, let's get right on in to today's video. Kicking things off, jumping straight into the first myth. The first myth is what happens when a supply drop lands in a slipstream. Located around the map, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with these slipstreams and how there aren't too many of them. So the fact that a supply drop has the chance to land in a slipstream is very rare, but we managed to make it happen. In game, I actually managed to get a zone to close in around one of these broken UFOs, and the supply drop was called in directly over one of these slipstreams, and it even landed, you know, right in the crevice of the broken UFO, so you literally cannot brake to get to it. When flying through the slipstream, if you make contact with the balloon from the supply drop, it'll pop it immediately, leaving only the crate. Now, unfortunately, if the crate is too far in the middle of the slipstream, it'll be gone. You have no chance to open it, but if it does land a little bit on the edge like it did for me, you will be able to open it, fortunately, but you have to be super fast to grab your loot, because if the loot does fall into the slipstream and it stays in there, you are not able to pick it up unless you are standing on the ground. So you cannot glide and pick up items. That's the key thing to remember. Going into the next myth, and a pretty highly requested myth. This myth is what happens when you land on top of the Caretaker's laser, as if you're trying to like walk on it or something. Now, this is actually a very important myth, and you might want to keep this one in mind because it might save you in game. In game, setting this up, I basically had the Caretaker on the edge of the map. I then built like a wooden platform over the edge of it, hoping that the Caretaker would then use his laser ability, destroy the platform, and I would be on top of the laser. Now, if you're unfortunate enough to get stuck on top of the Caretaker's laser, this exact same situation, you really just have to hope for the best, because it might seem that you will just fall straight through the laser, take a few damage points, you know, while you do go through it, but that's not the case. Your player will literally keep getting hit above the laser, and your health will be drained until his ability is over. And if you don't have, you know, a solid 200 HP, you might not survive this. Going into the next myth, is will you run faster while you have the hot chili pepper effect from, you know, a chili chug splash, a chili pepper, while you do the dash with the Sideways Scythe? I love doing these types of myths because in game it's pretty difficult to tell the actual speed differences until you put both of the clips side by side, one without the chili pepper effect and one with it. So I definitely had to try this one out. Obviously, in game I had to get the Sideways Scythe, as well as, you know, something that could give me the chili pepper effect, whether it was the chili chug splash or a chili pepper itself. Now, in game it felt like I was definitely running faster when I did have the hot chili pepper effect, but no matter what, if you do have the Sideways Scythe, when you do the dash, you run the exact same speed whether you have the effect or not. This is very good to keep in mind, because the chili peppers are pretty valuable, and they can make that much of a difference in a real fight for getting away, running into zone, and you don't want to waste it if you think you're going to run faster with the dash. Going straight into the next myth. The next myth is what happens when the Caretaker walks into water. Now, I think it's safe to say that the Caretaker boss is basically, you know, the leader of all of the zombies in Fortnite. I mean, he roams around the map, and when you actually take him on for a boss fight, he will summon zombies, so that must say something. When zombies touch water, they will actually evaporate immediately, making it pretty easy to take them out if you are near a large body of water. Now, is this an efficient way to take out the Caretaker? Can you just bait the Caretaker to go into the water to take him out, or does that not work? Now, if you are on the edge of the map near a cliff, the Caretaker boss will actually hit a wall. He will want to walk out into the water, but it will not allow him. Maybe it's too big of a drop or something. He will use his ability, but you can't get him into the water that way. Now, after looking for a few more matches, I managed to find a Caretaker boss next to a river, and after baiting him for a little while, I managed to get him to walk directly through the river. He also stopped in it, used his ability a few times, and the water seems to have no effect whatsoever whatsoever. He just kind of floats on top of it. Not even floats, he doesn't even like notice the water. It would make sense if it would damage him a little bit, but it seems like he just does not care. So is he really a zombie boss? Is he something in disguise? Because the water doesn't affect him like how it should. Going into the next myth is what happens when you drop the mythical witch broom while you are gliding in midair. In the past few episodes, we've done so many myths revolving around the mythical witch broom, but this one I never thought of till I saw how highly requested it was. In game, I had a mythical witch broom. I launched myself up into the air. In the middle of gliding, I decided to drop it, and it'll actually allow you to drop the item, and you will continue floating around on the mythical witch broom. Nothing changes except it literally drops to the ground. Now, unfortunately, I tried to use this as a way to bypass the 20-second cooldown, maybe have it start a couple seconds early, so while you are still gliding, you could get that cooldown to, you know, slowly tick down back to 0. But that does not change it one bit. Even though you are gliding and you do drop it, the cooldown for the mythical witch broom will not start until your feet touch the ground. Going into the next myth, and a pretty highly requested myth as well. This myth is, since the Caretaker is a shadow, can it walk through unbreakable objects like the reboot van, bridges, rocks, whatever it may be? When you consume like a shadow cube, or you know, whatever turns you into a shadow, you are able to phase through like armored walls, buildings, and sometimes unbreakable objects depending on how thick they are. Now, the Caretaker, 99% of the time, he is in this shadow form, and he destroys literally anything in his path, including builds. So what happens if, you know, he walks to like a bridge or a reboot van? Will that actually stop him in his tracks, or will he go straight through it? Now, fortunately, in game, I managed to get the Caretaker to walk literally through an unbreakable bridge. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this bridge next to Retail Row. You could even go to it in game. You cannot destroy through it, and the Caretaker walked through it like it was nothing. He destroyed all of the builds, the bus on top, the stuff underneath, but the bridge itself, it stayed there, while the Caretaker's half of his body was on top and the other half is beneath. The Caretaker also used his ability where his fist came out, making him partly not a shadow, and they still phase through the build. So no matter what it might be, you can never hide from the Caretaker, so you might just want to run. Going into the next myth, and a pretty funny myth. This myth is what happens when a zombie steps on a sideways geyser. Now, in the sideways anomaly zones, there's these geysers that are located all around it, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar. When you do step on one of these, it'll launch your player up into the air and pretty far, especially since you have the anti-gravity effect. You literally just glide. The zombies are pretty smart. They will usually avoid the geysers, but if you do manage to have one of them try and attack you, so they'll throw, you know, like the little ball at you, you could manage to bait one of them onto the geysers, and it will launch them up extremely high into the air, just like your regular player. And the zombies kind of like, they don't know what to do when they're flying. This is pretty fun to mess around with. I managed to get a zombie to land on one of the roofs at Weeping Woods, and the zombie had literally no clue what to do. He's still up there to this day. I don't think he ever got down, but pretty cool, fun little myth. Going into the next myth, and a pretty highly requested myth. This myth is what happens when you do a jumping emote while you have the zero gravity effect from like a hop rock. So when you have the anti-gravity effect, you know, after consuming a shadow cube or even a hop rock, your player jumps about like 3 to 4 times higher than normal. So if the anti-gravity effect does go over to the emotes, you will most definitely see it. I equipped a few of the most common emotes that also, you know, have, you know, backflips, or where your player just jumps up a little bit. I then went into creative mode, consumed a hop flopper, which then gave me the zero gravity effect, and it doesn't do anything to the emotes. Every single emote I tried, your player will still just bounce the exact same height as normal, just as the emote does. Going straight into the next myth. The next myth is what happens when a loot llama bounces on top of a cube in the Convergence POI. So the Convergence POI, the ground basically is made up of a ton of Kevin the Cube, so you just bounce all around. And back in the day, I had a loot llama land on top of Kevin the Cube, and they behaved differently back then. They didn't actually run around, get up, you know, that sort of thing. They would just kind of sit there. So in game, I managed to have a loot llama spawn in the direct center of the Convergence on one of these, you know, Kevin the Cube floors, and the thing just continued bouncing. There was nothing it was able to do to get out of this bouncing area unless you place a floor beneath it. If you do enough damage to the loot llama to, you know, kind of knock it out for a couple of seconds, it does that little flip on the regular floor, but this time, since it's on the bouncer, it'll continuously flip literally forever. I mean, I had the thing flip for a solid minute, and the loot llamas are supposed to disappear after 30 seconds. This was definitely a very rare thing to happen. I've never seen this happen before, and it made for a pretty awesome myth.